Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
WESN.
I'm Sean Michael Small. This is Talking Point. One of the things that I have noticed in our politics is the question on whether newcomers, younger parliamentarians and political hopefuls, if they view politics a certain way or are coerced to take up a role. And that role, or those roles, tend to be doing the things that quite a few of us find aggravating or distasteful. Now, in some cases, it seems that role is a natural fit with some more established pot stirrers in the various political parties. But then you have the younger ones who at times say bombastic things. Now, maybe it's because of the exuberance of youth. Maybe it's because they think they need to say something drastic in order to stand out. Or maybe they were assigned a role. They have to be the bombastic ones because they're young. No pun intended. I don't know if Stuart Young would qualify for that, or at least not initially. Or maybe if it is an internal error of judgment, maybe he himself might be an example of that to some extent, to some degree. But there are other, even younger, and just as new, if not newer, parliamentarians to him who at times seemingly make it a point to show off their exuberance to a degree which I find unnecessary. Maybe others don't. One of the examples, I guess you could say, was when then Tobago West MP Shamfa Cudjoe was talking about, I believe it was the new way Tobago was going to be split. Essentially, when she had the comment about in the middle of Tobago, nobody lives there, which, even if it was true, probably not the best thing to say in the manner of which it was said. Because on some level, it made light of a situation, and it was a sarcastic remark on a situation, and it was probably untrue that absolutely nobody lived there. And even if it was a small amount of people, there will be others who know and would befriend those who live, you know, close to the central-ish mountain range of the island. Among other things, there were times when in her portfolios, people questioned why she was there. And I guess on some level, we forget she was new to the game. And there's a lot more to being a politician, unfortunately, than what we see. And a lot of the ugly side of politics we don't actually see. It's behind closed doors in the meetings amongst their own peers where you get some of the uglier side of politics. And then, of course, at times, the party versus party ugliness, that's all public, but there are probably aspects of that that we don't see. Who is your friend? Who is not your friend? Who can help you? Who's not going to help you? Who's going to undermine you? All of these things, young political hopefuls and politicians are having to maneuver. Which is why, I wondered if perhaps in some cases it's easy to use them and then discard them. Now, in the case of Shamfa Cudjoe-Lewis, she has just successfully competed for, won the leadership of the PNM Tobago Council. And she said something that I would not have necessarily expected. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm surprised that she would say this, and I never thought in a million years that she would have the capacity to say something like this. But it's not something I would expect from politicians in general. It's not the type of political messaging you hear very frequently. And then, of course, you also, just because it's said doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be followed through with. But, like I said, just in general, you could replace Shamfa Cudjoe-Lewis with any politician, past or present, in Parliament. And I would not have been accustomed to such language, so I would not have expected it. Now, she said it different ways, but the line I like, which is a quote, "My people is Kelvon people. Kelvon people is my people." Kelvon Morris being the former minority leader and I think he was the only person that ran against her directly. And he had a whole slate where Shamfa Cudjoe-Lewis did not. And I guess on some level there is a practical necessity in what she just said, because he had a slate. She doesn't have a slate, but now she is tasked. Either one of them would, whoever the leader was going to be, had to go into this thing understanding the fact that they have to rebuild the PNM in Tobago. Not too dissimilar to what was going on with the party in Trinidad with regards to national politics. And this is probably the best first step, immediately trying to unify PNM Tobago in order to prepare it, in order to strengthen the foundation, which was significantly weakened by all of the things that happened that she, Mr. Morris, and others who are now having to pick up the pieces had little to do with, as far as I am aware. They weren't central to those stories, but they now have to deal with the aftermath. One of the things that I find very immature with our politics is how we draw lines. If you disagree with me, you're my enemy. If you're my enemy, we have nothing to do with each other ever again. Until I find some political use for you, and I'm no longer vexed with you. But for the most part, that's not how it goes. Lines are drawn. I mean, just look at the dissidents. They were discarded. Don't want to work with them again. What, you have something to say about the leadership? Granted, what was said might be a lot more toned down than what was implied or what is assumed. But that essentially is how politics goes. I mean, Mr. Manning could not outright get rid of Dr. Keith Rowley. If he could, maybe he would have. He did have a point in time in his last term or his second to last term, I can't remember exactly which, where he, I think it was his last term, he basically changed a lot of his slate. And maybe he had good reason then. But it is in line with how our politics goes. Do not cross the line. Do not try to oppose. Follow the leader. Do not go against the machine. Now, the PNM at times is a bit more democratic. That is for better and for worse. But it was a very mature political move, and again, maybe it was born out of necessity for Shamfa Kuja Lewis to basically say, now that this is over, yes, I have won, but I still want you, maybe I still need you. Quote, I want to work with Calvin Morris. I want to work with everybody who would have offered themselves. So many other stalwarts who would have supported Calvin. I'm willing to work, willing to listen, willing to learn, and willing to get down and get the job done. I cannot do it alone. One of the unfortunate realities of our political system is that the vast majority of the importance on how we conduct elections is just with the leader. The slate at times seems completely irrelevant. Which is probably not true, but it seems at times completely irrelevant. The most important thing is the leader. Not a lot of Trinbagonians necessarily follow the issues, and because of that, they only follow the personalities that is not the political leader to a point. And that's why you have situations like the political leader, Penelope Beckles of the PNM, or when she was in opposition, Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, being so heavily criticized. Because the various speakers, both expert analysts and rum shop politicians, essentially saw, in order to win an election, who is the leader? Is the leader strong enough to win an election? Which is, to some extent, true, say, in other political systems. But the difference is the American president does not run with his cabinet as part of a slate. Their legislature is elected separately. You could vote for a Democrat to represent you and a Republican to be a president. We have it unified. So we essentially vote who we want to be our prime minister, and we have to live with whoever our MP is if that overrides our decision making enough, which it usually does. And because of that focus, culturally, that is how we view politics. It's all on the leader, and to some extent, and this is perhaps where some leaders get into trouble, there is, of course, the temptation of essentially doing it alone. Being the lord of the kingdom, passing out favors in order to keep his subordinates or her subordinates in line. Well, ironically, these days, in terms of political leadership that's active in, well, in terms of the top two positions, both Trinidad and, or central government, I should say, and Tobago. It's mostly women at the top now, huh? But while an interesting observation, and at the end of the day, hopefully they're all the best people for the job. And it's not necessarily her gender that's important, but rather what she says. When she says she wants to work with everybody under the umbrella of the PNM in order to try to rebuild this part of the party, their presence in Tobago. Because at the end of the day, the TPP could have all the best intentions, but if the opposition is weak, it's only a matter of time before it goes off the rails, because Chief Secretary Fali Augustine cannot be there forever. The original founders of the party cannot be there forever. The system is not designed to say, well, you know, once you find the right people, just freeze them, they'll be there forever. No, at some point, the system has to survive a turnover, a change. And if you're not careful and you don't have a check and balance, when that turnover happens, it could get really ugly really fast. Because a lot can go wrong just because your opposition is too weak. It can go more extreme than what we have seen in our political systems, even in the past however many years. Now the thing is, I'm hoping that this is a sign of political maturity, and perhaps it could be a sign of political independence of Shamfa Cudjoe-Lewis. Now that she is not necessarily having to advance anyone else's agenda and has the capacity to make her own decisions to whatever degree her position allows her to. Of course, she's technically still under the leadership of opposition leader Penelope Beckles, but the relationship at times is not that subservient between, PNM in Central or the PNM in Trinidad and the PNM in Tobago. I'm hoping, not because I want the PNM to rise from the ashes and defeat the UNC, I want our politics to be more mature. So I will always hope for all politicians, and especially the younger ones, to show me something more than just being bombastic in Parliament. I'm not even sure if that is your genuine opinion or a script you are assigned to deliver. What that the political parties are asking their younger politicians to do? Or what is it that these younger politicians seemingly interpret as what they are supposed to be doing or are required to do or are requested to do? Maybe not directly, maybe indirectly. Because if they are being pushed to fulfill a role of essentially a mindless attack dog. And then, of course, the question is, how many people do you need doing things like that? Then it does not augur well for the actual political development of the next generation of politicians. Because all they learn, if that's what they are left to do, is essentially how to be on the attack, but not even how to be on the attack in any sort of constructive way. Case in point, the Prime Minister had something, she said something interesting again. If you come for my eye, I will take your whole head. This is the quote. Now, this is apparently directed at her critics. I think part of me wonders, and look, on some level, to various degrees, at times worse, maybe at times not as aggressive, but probably at times worse. Her predecessor, substantive predecessor, was very defensive against criticisms from media. Now, one of the big differences is he actually was present. But here's the quote. Or let me give you the question. This is in, I think it might be today's Express. Yes, today's Express. The UNC brands you as KPB 2.0. I mean, don't know if I appreciate the marketing gimmicks, but What concretely distinguishes this version of your leadership from your previous tenure? And why should the public believe the outcome will be different this time? So the Prime Minister has answered, my disposition is more stoic, hard-nosed, and focused on helping those who help themselves. These are good traits and focus on driving positive outcomes for the country. I have no intention of trying to please everyone, which I have no problem with that. You can't please everybody. My aim is to please the law-abiding people who go out every day and make an honest day's work to positively contribute to society. The question is, how do you identify who is law-abiding and who is not? I will not turn the other cheek as I did in years gone by, neither will I subscribe to an eye for an eye. If you come for my eye, I will take your whole head. It is either peace or total war, no in between. Now the problem with this is she's not talking about if Venezuela insults me again, which ironically, at times she seemed to turn the other cheek to that. This is basically speaking to her fellow citizens. Now granted, yes, some of her political opponents will go too far. And I'm not saying that her situation is some special, oh my gosh, how could they say that about her? No, our politics generally goes too far. The UNC goes too far at times. The PNM goes too far. People in the media go too far. Although, when I say media, if you want to say traditional media, like media houses and stuff, compared to political operators, they don't necessarily go as far, not in the manner of which I'm speaking of. But of course, then you have the various internet, social media speakers who have very aggressive, bombastic, interesting, out there, extreme claims. And yes, it goes too far. Everybody goes too far, doesn't make it right. So if it is that she is hardening herself against criticisms that's going too far, that's getting too personal, that is unnecessarily destructive, that is not constructive, all right, fine. But I do wonder if, to some degree also, this is just because, well, the Vote Kamala campaign, which, my understanding, which could be wrong, they got consultation from the Democratic Party, the Vote Obama campaign. I think that was his re-election campaign, and they tried something similar, and it did not work. And of course, there was the whole situation with the cabal and how many ministers she had to fire, and her persona wasn't so much destroyed by all of the bubble that happened within her government, but I guess on some level it was diminished. And seemingly there was the perception by some that she was weaker or she was weak, and she's trying to fight that. All right, fine. On some level, the way how her party is set up, I don't even know if she has a choice, to be honest. But then the reporter actually asked a good follow-up. How would you respond to the criticism that your tone is not prime ministerial, lacks diplomacy, and that you are not unifying citizens to rally together to pursue our common goal of nation building? And her answer, the more you concede to persons who unobjectively criticize you in an attempt to appease them when you don't have to concede, the more they become contemptuous of you because they see it as weakness, indecisiveness, instead of appreciating your magnanimity. No matter what you do or say, some people will always deliberately misinterpret you. Most of the criticisms from the trolls, haters, and pseudo-intellectuals lack neutrality, fairness, or fact-based analysis, and are mostly based on personal feelings, biases, political allegiances. It is impossible to unify people who live with irrational hatred towards you. That's bordering on insanity. I won't go on with the whole answer, but The problem with the answer is she's not wrong, but the answer implies the assumption that her own party doesn't do the same, that she herself does not do the same. You can't call a man small pen and then want to tell me that you have the best intentions. And that's a minor grievance. Let's not forget, by her own junior minister, that is a sign of her obsession, by the logic of her own junior minister. And that is one of the examples. That is one of the examples of the stuff that she is claiming to having to guard herself against. Because part of the problem is, and I think this happens with both the PNM and the UNC, who are the haters? It's easy to say, they disagree with me, they must be wrong, their disagreement is irrational. One of the issues is we don't debate issues. We don't debate ideology. We don't debate solutions. The debate is a whole set of political bubble. And then the rebuttal, I don't want to hear nothing from PNM because something to do, blah, 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 that has nothing to do with the topic at hand. As if it's a schoolyard fight. Yes, I understand that that would win if it was a family quarrel. It would win if it's a fight between friends, but it's borderline gaslighting, and it is academically disingenuous. If we're debating a thing, let's debate the thing. If you have an issue with another area, another topic of conversation, wait your turn and bring that up at the appropriate time. So, how do you identify who are the law-abiding citizens that you are to put your best foot forward for? How do you identify who are the actual trolls? I mean, the most egregious examples, yes, I get it. But given the fact that the government is doing its best to hide from all media, at times that's what it seems like. Is all your criticism on trolls? Because I'll say this. Are you saying that Talking Point is trolling everybody? Well then, at the very least, we're not biased against anybody. And therein lies the problem. I think on some level, I understand the Prime Minister has to guard against irrational hate. I get that. However, yes, there's no easy answer on how you bring the country together, and that's what separates great leaders from ordinary people. And the Prime Minister essentially is answering, like her predecessor, more like an ordinary person than a great leader. If you look at things on a spectrum, her cabinet deals with aggravating insults hailed at them more like ordinary people than great leaders. Again, similar to the other side. When they were in power, they did the same thing. So I come back to one of the points that I've been harping on for the last couple of months and years. Are we being run by our best and brightest? Do we select our best and brightest? Is this as good as it gets for Trinidad and Tobago? Because I would argue the answer to that question is no. Our best leaders are not in Parliament. Period. Can't be. Because the human potential has shown both outside of TNT and within TNT that humanity can be better than this. And we have shown that we can be better than this. Now, is it all the politicians' fault? Is it that they're incapable? No, they're not incapable. They take their cues from us. Now, one of the things that I find worrisome from a long-term strategic thinking mindset is a headline that I saw in another newspaper. And again, the newspapers are bouncing between seemingly positive and criticisms for the government, so who's biased? But a couple of analysts have said, or stakeholders have said, despite the Prime Minister's age, there's no need to discuss party leadership succession anytime soon. I don't know why you would think, if you had the best interests of the nation and even the party, the UNC, at heart, you would think this is a good idea. Because what happened to the Democratic Party? The moment Hillary Clinton lost the election to Donald Trump, their entire leadership plan fell apart. Completely fell apart. Their political identity fell apart. The ideology that they practiced and believed in fell apart. That's why the party of free speech became the party of censorship. That's why the party, I believe it was the Democratic Party, I could be wrong. I can't remember if it was Kennedy who ended segregation. Let me find out. Lyndon B. Johnson. Took over after Kennedy was assassinated. Even with a Supreme Court ruling, he had to send troops in order to end segregation in education in the states. All of a sudden now, segregation, if you followed the political debates, the ideological debates in the United States, segregation all of a sudden was the thing that civil rights, well, maybe, let me not say civil rights leaders, I say that loosely, were championing post-2016. And what happened? You had to deal with a situation where they went back to the well to a president who was probably too old, because not just because of his chronological age, but his physical and mental health were in decline. Nobody wanted to admit it, because heavens forbid anyone actually admits the truth with regards to someone's well-being and question the appropriateness of him having to have such a job like being president of the United States. No, it's more important that we win the political battle. Forget the good of the country. And look what happened after him. The succession plan, after he wasn't intended as the next Democratic candidate for president. And look what happened after him. It was a mess. And now you're in a situation where the only saving grace of the Democratic Party is the fact that the Republican Party is in a similar mess because they can't figure out post-Trump to save their life. And they already had a crack at it in 2020. They had 5 years to try and figure, or 4 years to try and figure it out, and they couldn't. Look what happened to the PNM. Both the Tobago Council and the PNM Central Executive. There was some kind of ill-thought-out, ill-conceived plan post Dr. Keith Rowley. And one could argue that they would have lost the election anyway, but would it have been that bad is the question. We'll never know the answer. But a similar situation happened with the Tobago Council. Now, I get it. On some level, you have to, in theory, if you are a truly democratic institution, you can't necessarily have long-term plans because it all depends on the will of the people, right? Except we've seen where that does not matter at times. The PNM already, we knew, was potentially going to be in trouble. Let me put it that way. We potentially knew that PNM was going to be in trouble post Dr. Keith Rowley. And we speculated that the same thing is going to happen to the UNC. Why on God's green earth does anyone think, oh, you know, well, it's fine? Because all it takes is one medical emergency, or perhaps maybe in 2 years, 3 years, Prime Minister Kamala Persaud-Bissessou will say, look, I really want to retire, given the fact that I believe she's 78. And at the end of the day, while you don't necessarily, you can't necessarily say this is going to be her successor, everybody just has to accept it. No, there's still a process to go through. It's still a good idea to maybe line up potential candidates, you know, give them a little bit more responsibility, give them opportunities to engage with the public, see where they're at, and in part, those opportunities will also show the public, hey, where am I at this point in time? Do you like what you see? Do you not like what you see? As opposed to, well, you know, something happens, or maybe the Prime Minister just decides to retire, and now we're scrambling with chickens with our heads cut off. And whatever momentum that we had is now sunk. That's great political strategy. Just saying. Let me move on a little bit quick and wrap up some stuff speaking about strategy. Piarco International Airport, they put out a video. I saw it on social media. I don't know if it hit television, to be honest, or had any other means of distribution. So I don't know how widespread this message got, but it got wide enough, it seems. Piarco International Airport was looking to merge domestic travel with international travel by putting domestic passengers through the international gates, essentially. And one of the claims was it was going to bring inter-island travel in line with global aviation standards. And that decision apparently has been delayed until further notice. Now, when I saw it, the first thing I asked, and the report in today's papers brings up the same question: why? Because one of the stakeholders interviewed, a guest house owner, basically said, why do we need to make something more efficient when there didn't seem to be any issues with regards to its efficiency? And that's a pretty good question. The reason why I said why was more along the lines of, isn't this going to complicate things? Because international travel has certain standards for security, among other things. And if you're putting people through the same systems, are you now telling security personnel that, hey, you need to pay attention to the boarding pass, so if X, blah, 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 if Y, blah, blah, blah. Now, other airports, I believe, their regional and international travel goes through some of the same terminals, right? But then again, their standards might be more or less streamlined and unified. So it's not as though, you know, the treatment of an international flight is different to a domestic flight in other jurisdictions, in those big airports. But the stakeholder pointed out, you know, she would bring certain things with her on a domestic flight that she couldn't do on an international flight. And now are the standards going to change? But I think one of the big issues would be, to me, the security. We already have issues with security in Trinidad and Tobago. Are we really confident? Yeah, we could overcomplicate things. And you know, some people are. They will find a way. I haven't thought it through. But somebody is going to try and be a smart man at some point or another. And at the end of the day, the domestic terminal is a very simple solution to what could be a complex problem that you don't have currently. What is the benefit of unifying domestic and international travel? The only thing I could think of is you get to take the security personnel from the domestic gate and include them now at all of the international security checkpoints. But what tends to happen, based on my limited observation, is you don't have your international flights spaced out throughout the week where it's one at a time. There seemingly are at least periods where you have a couple or more international flights going on. Because you have the entire northern end of the airport, all of those counters long lines throughout the whole length of that terminal or that wing. So the promise is that it will be more efficient because, yes, for a lot of the domestic flights, you will have more security checkpoints to go through, but the line to get in, to get your hand luggage scanned and to go sit down in the domestic terminal, while it's not fast, it wasn't backbreaking, it wasn't some existential psychological crisis that we need to solve. And what would be an issue is for those domestic flyers who, unfortunately, when they're looking to go through security, they're going to see a long line because there's 1 or 2 international flights departing around the same time, and they have to be in those lines with the international travelers. And I think the problem is the days where you could make that decision, which is at the very beginning, to have international and domestic travel together, that ship sailed decades ago, because culturally, this is what we're accustomed to. And if you're concerned about the customer experience, as the video to some extent made the claim that that's the case, this potentially is a step backwards for domestic travel, not necessarily forwards. Yes, there will be some access to the various shops and stalls and what have you in the international departure areas, but is that enough? At the end of the day, it's a domestic flight. So I don't know if it's to facilitate businesses through those shops, those stores. Is it a concession that international travel just isn't enough anymore? I don't know. But the whole decision seems very weird, and one of the things is the lack of transparency of not explaining it. So now we don't know what's going on, and it comes across as being very arbitrary, unnecessary, changing things for the sake of change rather than having a good point, because the points expressed, and with regards, especially with tourism, I have reason to have low confidence in some of the decision making done with any aspect of tourism. Because usually what happens is the decisions are made by people that don't know what they're doing. Whether it's the ferry service and the inter-island ferry, whether it's the domestic air bridge, whether it's CAL conducting international flights to and from new destinations, policies with regards to hotels. Hilton has given us an extension. It sounds like the relationship with Hilton is going to be a casualty of our economics. That's what it sounds like. The $400 million that I lamented the previous administration technically had as an item in the budget to renovate Hilton Trinidad, apparently nothing was done with regards to that. No money was allocated, apparently, if it is the same $400 million. And at this point, I'm not necessarily going to fault the government, the current government, for not having $400 million to throw at Trinidad Hilton. And the fact that we have to use taxpayers' money to renovate the hotels, as opposed to the hotels earning enough revenue to renovate themselves. And here's the thing, if the hotels can't earn the revenue, even if they were full, to pay for their own renovations, then maybe as an asset, we're overvaluing it. And maybe it's a loss-making asset at this point, at least how it is being run. Not that it's Hilton's fault, but just in general. I doubt that's the case. So why is it, like Magdalena, another property that Hilton did extricate itself from, can all of these grandiose projects, and in Hilton's case, it's such an old project, the fault really lies in the fact that they built Hyatt. And now Hilton is semi-redundant. And that could be one of the sources of its financial issues. Because a lot of events now, it's in the bigger, better, newer location. The government is competing with itself, undermining itself, and then having to use taxpayer dollars to prop up an asset that it undermined in its own Wonderful strategic foresight, right? I won't be surprised if Hilton Trinidad is going to be named something else at some point, and that might be the beginning of the end, because the situation seemingly is not necessarily even directly attributable to how the asset is being managed, similar to Magdalena. So because of that, it's not as though we'll be able to get by somehow without it potentially falling apart, similar to Magdalena. And then what we're going to do? Try to sell it to somebody who's going to buy it. Because the circumstances around the hotel are not going to change just because a private owner picks it up. Ironically, this is a case where government ownership directly is not the problem, but rather the tourism industry being so weak, so essentially non-existent, being so misunderstood by too many people that make these decisions, has led our large hotels to potentially be unprofitable. They want to sell Magdalena. I don't know who's going to buy that. I hope the teacher doesn't, I don't know, directly take it over. That, to me, would be a mistake. I assume it's under central government. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get into some more stories. There is a request to deal with some stories. However, at times, I don't speak about everything because I'm waiting on more information, right? Believe it or not, I do not just speculate about things off the top of my head, just wildly, without some degree of either knowledge of how systems works or knowledge of the situation and maybe historical precedents to help inform said situations. But I'll see what I could do. Let's take a break, however. There is a story to get to from since yesterday. Not so much a story, a continuation of the big story from last week. I'll get to that and more after this. And of course, we'll open up the phone line. Stay tuned.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 68-61662 and start building your future.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing@wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful. The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of this game.
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
I'm back and talk about the WSND Content Capital. Now, the situation from the Auditor General report we should be dealing with tomorrow with Karen Shishera. My initial suspicion is that this loan was just a way for the government to try to get more loans. And the issue, of course, is money. The previous government, I suspect, money and loan financing and all of these things were potentially kind of being done in a very fast and loose manner that potentially circumvented procedures, or at least was done in a very messy way that might be legal but maybe not proper, if that makes sense. And I'm not entirely sure to what degree the president is directly involved in something like that. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, part of it is there's probably more we need to know, so I'll refrain from speaking about it too much more, because just getting the figures, and of course the figures with the Auditor General report generally is alarming, right? Some of the stuff that I admittedly I did not necessarily deal with that topic yesterday or follow the topic to deal with yesterday, so there were so many figures flying about, I didn't necessarily get what the caller yesterday was referencing to with regards to the underreporting of revenue, to borrow a phrase from the previous Auditor General issue, right? So we'll save on that with that and the HDC mismanagement. But one of my initial assumptions or speculations would be that this is kind of what the previous government did, and that's why the previous Minister of Finance took an issue with the Auditor General, because essentially she was saying, hold on, you kind of have to do things properly. And he was like, well, you know, I'm trying to, you know, keep things together with duct tape and string, but just because you think you can doesn't mean you probably should. And that's underselling the severity of the situation. I know we'll save the commentary for tomorrow. Now, one of the things I did want to get into is the updates with regards to crime. And it's twofold per se. One, of course, is the stories that came out on the charges with regards to 3 individuals for the murder of the Municipal Police Corporal Anuska Eversley. One of the things is, at least one of the suspects or one of the people who was appeared in court, so I guess at this point you could say charged, was being held under PDO, and the defense attorney is already bringing up the questions with regards to the technical aspects of how he is being held, or just to justify how he's being held. And I do hope that we don't end up in a situation where the complexity of utilizing PDOs and then having to then go to court and formally filing charges and stuff, you end up having issues technically with a case like this. One of the unfortunate catch-22s with high-profile cases is scapegoating people has a negative connotation, because at the end of the day, you don't want to just say, well, because this is a high-profile case, we're going to treat it differently. You don't want it to necessarily be treated differently, right? There's a lot of issues that could come from that, because then it means what? So normal cases don't get the same level of treatment? What does that mean? But the flip side is, with high-profile cases, you cannot afford for it to be undermined in any way. The law has to be seen as effective and going through properly, and it needs to be an example of the law being applied effectively, properly. So, listen, if the state has no case, fine, right? Innocent until proven guilty. But what I hope to not see is a whole set of issues on technical grounds where, well, this wasn't done properly, and this T wasn't crossed, and this I wasn't dotted. And because of that, the suspects get off, and then we're just left with questions. They themselves will technically, in the court of public opinion, not be exonerated, but they won't be guilty either if that's the case. So I'm already kind of bracing for that, because I feel as though between the intelligence of defense attorneys and the complacency of prosecutors, this probably happens more often than we like to admit. One of the things coming out of this situation also is the colleagues of the murdered officer saying that the state is abandoning municipal officers. Now, one of the things is their representative, their association, is speaking about the public perception of municipal police officers moving forward. Officers are being judged amid speculation, commentary, and misinformation. Well, here's part of the issue. And we've had Ashraf on the show a long time ago speak to this. You want to wear police uniforms, you're going to get police baggage. You're going to be viewed as police, you're going to be judged as harshly as the TTPS is going to be judged. That's point number one. And at the end of the day, if you think that there's inaccuracies, you have to put things in place to prevent those inaccuracies. And one of the things is, if you don't want to be labeled a bad apple, well then what are you going to do about the bad apples? That's point number 2. Because I said this about the TTPS. I warned the association head for the Police Social and Welfare Association. If you want to go with the party line from police executive about the Samaru murder, Samaru killing, if you want to be defensive on officers in the face of publicly revealed evidence that is very difficult to explain, then the public is going to look at you. And they're going to basically see, oh, you're part of the perceived problem. If police officers are not going to speak out, yes, I understand, police officers do prosecute, investigate, successfully go after the bad apples in the service. But on some level, and this probably includes the executive as well, you want to not look bad, so you want to keep those things under wraps, but because we never see the police actually successfully go after crooked cops, instead of shielding the service or shielding police from looking bad because you don't want to reveal their wrongdoings, you end up making the service look bad because the service looks as though it's doing absolutely nothing. So if the association isn't speaking out, if the members aren't speaking out, and if the police are not revealing enough transparency with regards to how it deals with its own officers breaking the law, what's the public supposed to say? And it's similar to this. I've never heard anything from the Municipal Police Association before. Where is your public spokesperson speaking out against the law breaking of your fellow officers? And where is the cultural shift to say, yes, we understand that there is a problem, and that for the public to see, not just for your own internal benefit, for the public to see, here, get some kind of message of we're doing something about it. Because one of the ways you protect yourself from not being labeled as one of the bad ones is showing that you're trying to work against that. But no, it's, you know what? And this is why people think the police are like a gang. Nobody wants to snitch, nobody wants to bad talk, nobody wants to X, Y, and Z. I understand there are certain reasons why it's not, you can't just say whatever comes to the top of your head and whatever you know, I get it. But more needs to be said from officers, from the police associations, about what is being done or what they demand to be done with regards to police corruption. And it does not help that no one is basically speaking in a direct and authoritative way with regards to body cameras to demand tools like but not limited to body cameras. No one. No one from the service. Individual officers might understand it, might want it, might demand it in internal communication. But to the public, what we see is a service and a police overall service, not just the police service of the TTPS, that doesn't care about these things. You wear the same uniform, you're going to be viewed as part of the problem. The trust and confidence of the police service, part of it is because of the negative actions of the non-TTPS officers. Part of it is the negative action of the TTPS officers. And similarly, the non-TTPS officers, you want to wear the same uniform, you're going to be lumped in. Just like the good TTPS officers, you'll be lumped in with all the bad. But then also the municipal police kind of need to understand, look, This is a bad situation. This is a high-profile situation and an unprecedented situation. Instead of saying, woe is me, what are you going to do about it? And part of it is there are too many people in these national security jobs. They're just there to collect a check. They're not necessarily there because they have a calling to be a police officer. And then the whole situation with municipal police, amongst others, when you think about it, given the size of our nation, is kind of wonky. And as been reported in other reports throughout the week, potentially redundant. But hey, local government have a police force. What could possibly go wrong? And this is the other thing. If the police service and the association and the spokespeople and et cetera, and the membership, the officers on the ground, and unfortunately, you see this across multiple areas of the public service. You're afraid to say anything, you say nothing. And yes, it could be the leadership, it could be the politicians, it could be the appointed commissioner, the executive, whatever. Maybe it's because they made a bad decision. You're not saying nothing. If you're not saying nothing, you essentially approve of whatever it is, or at least you're not voicing your displeasure. And I know that it's not easy. It's easy for me to say, it's harder to do. But I think, does anyone not understand that we've reached a point where, with public trust and confidence so bad, if you really are concerned about the health of policing in the country, you can't just operate as though, well, it's not that bad, right? We don't need to do anything drastic, right? We don't need to actually decide, hey, maybe we need to come together and figure this thing out and do something a little extraordinary. Something more than the usual ordinary means of don't say anything, put your head down, and hope that it all goes away. Because that is too often the public relations strategy, which has failed time and time again, but it's subscribed to because it's the easiest one. Because more often than not, public-facing people don't know what to say. They don't have that skill. We select them for other reasons beyond skill, and we get what we pay for. Now, one of the interesting observations with crime, because again, this is what the municipal police officers need to understand. This happened during a state of emergency, yeah? A state of emergency, where the government is trying to say crime is down. Crime is down, but police officers, or at least one, could go off the rails to this extent. Yes, municipal police, but I ain't there. They have guns, they have uniforms, I believe they have some kind of badge. It is what it is. Police officers going off the rails. That's what it looks like to the public. Don't expect to be treated with kids' gloves when you want to have a job like that and people see things going off the rails that badly. During a state of emergency, and during a state of emergency, again, the police are saying crime is going down. The commissioner is saying crime is going down. That's nice. But something that's interesting is the commissioner commented on some murders that happened over the weekend, saying that there's a shift in the patterns of criminals. Now, he did say this. I'm not entirely sure how accurate that statement is. If you observe some of the homicides this weekend, not gang-related, you had a gentleman armed with a cutlass chopping people. There are other instances where people got stabbed over the weekend. So we see a deviation from firearm-related crime to using basics of knives and that sort of thing. To go back to the old time days of beating it out with knives, cutlass, bottles, and that sort of thing. Now, the thing is, if it's not gang-related crime, is it really a change, a shift in the pattern of criminals? Because the implication is, if these aren't gang members, these are just random, lifelong criminals who are not gang members engaging in random street violence because they got vexed. So are these the home invasion types or what have you? Like, exactly how are these before these violent confrontations, were there criminals before? In order for you to say a shift? Because to me, if it's not gang-related murders, I don't know to what extent analyzing it as a pattern of criminal behavior is the best way to do so. But more importantly, what does it say? It's not the gangsters trying to find a way to work around the state of emergency. Because again, why would they? We saw the quadruple homicide where they just shut up the car. State of emergency or not. No, this speaks to other individuals for other motivations and other reasons wanting to engage in serious violent acts during a state of emergency. So there is a bit of a disconnect with the statistical trend of the murder rate being down, but the willingness of citizens to engage in violence and the motivations behind that seemingly are potentially expanding during a state of emergency, or the willingness, those who are willing to utilize potential lethal force is expanding during a state of emergency. And I'm not necessarily saying that the commissioner is misinterpreting the statistics. But in the midst of what should be good news, this is not necessarily a good sign. Maybe it is. Maybe in the past, these guys would have figured out a way to get their hands on an illegal gun and shot somebody instead of stab somebody. But throughout the years of the 600 murders, we had the random non-gun related murder. So, the Minister of Homeland Security, one of the things that is said in the report, he noted, while he would not beg the public to do While he would not beg the public to partner with national security, as he felt that it was their responsibility to take interest in their own safety, he did note that even with additional resources, any crime-fighting success would hinge on the support of the public and their willingness to partner with the police. So he doesn't want to have to beg you for the support. Although I would argue, hey, don't be too proud to beg. Because the issue is the support of the public, willingness to partner with the police. I think we've reached the point where you can't just tell the public, hey, you ought to do your part. No, the relationship between the public and the police service and national security is broken. And you can't just tell the public, hey, but you know, you have to still work with us. No, you have to do something to fix the relationship. And no offense, Minister, but on some level, at least to some people, not to everybody, I won't say that this was the crux, the one thing that, the straw that broke the camel's back, the one thing that did it in. But you did have a part to play in eroding that trust, at least further. Which, ironically, is the reverse. I would argue when the minister was on Beyond the Tape, at the point in time, as much as Independent Senator Richards took issue with, I can't remember, I think it's Superintendent Alexander, saying things that was potentially not authorized by the police executive, at the end of the day, I actually appreciated the things he had to say, because the police executive of that day was playing things way too safe with regards to what they were willing to say to the public and the unwillingness to level with the public. So, at that time, the current Minister of Homeland Security was one of the mechanisms of transparency in the police service, and I saw that as a positive. And that's why at the end of the day, you really should not be stuck up on all of the personal disparaging insults, thinking that's the best way to criticize the Minister of Homeland Security. But that whole body camera thing, I ain't gonna let that go. I can't. I just can't. It is not the only thing, but it is the most obvious thing to me. It is low-hanging fruit for sure. But you don't want to beg the public to help to work with the police. But then you're not necessarily listening to various stakeholders saying, hey, you have a problem with trust and confidence in the service. This is what we think you should do about it. You're not even necessarily giving us a good explanation as to why not. And let's not forget, it's come out that there was 123 guns stolen. I'm fairly certain we did not recover all of those weapons yet. There's another disconnect. You want the public to help the police when it seems like the police commissioner has no interest in helping the public. Because even I haven't made an application for an FUL, but that did not look well with regards to at least one anecdotal report on the commissioner and the reasonings specifically as to why an FUL was denied. That said, it's difficult to say they need to change things significantly. Insofar that crime is statistically reportedly lower. So, as much as some of us might think that they need to change things, how far the change needs to go is not so apparent. Because you run the risk, you make a change, and the murder rate skyrockets right back to where it was, depending on what kind of change you make. So, I myself am in a catch-22. It's not obvious that, hey, we need to get rid of this one, get rid of that one, change this, change that. The only caveat, going back to a previous point, is what's going to happen after the state of emergency? What's been put in place to deal with crime after the state of emergency when you no longer have PDOs? And also, to what extent is the trials? It was reported that officers were detained under PDOs and the like. Is the public going to get an account of those situations? I wonder if what you see in other jurisdictions is one instance of a police officer. It doesn't all make the news, but at times it does. And you have to balance off potentially putting someone in the crosshairs of the public versus it being a public interest story when you have potential wrongdoing by a member of national security. And it goes back to what I said before. Are you scapegoating the individual? Are you doing things that you wouldn't normally do with regards to cases like this? Are you treating him differently? Or is it just that you are trying to show how this is done and show people, no, we are willing, able, and actually are going after our own that break the law? How do you effectively show transparency without coming across as though, well, we just give you a couple examples and then for the rest, we treat with kids' gloves because we don't really want to, you know, have to deal with all of this for whatever reason? How safe do you feel? I guess ultimately is the question. Now there's one last part of the story to get to. And I'm not sure what to make of it. There were 3 murders in Valencia, and the police in the area, the head of division, is saying or at least claiming that the situation is not going to expand further. There is no current intelligence that suggests that members of the general public are being indiscriminately targeted. These incidents are targeted and stem from identifiable conflicts and criminal dynamics involving persons of interest. We are under a state of emergency. It's one of those things where I kind of forget myself. The sad part is everything that the head of the division is saying can be quite true, and that the police have the situation firmly under control. I've reached the point now where I just don't know. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you hear it, you say, all right, we're willing to listen to what you have to say, believe you, trust in what you have to say, because, you know, you don't want to just arbitrarily distrust your institutions. And you don't necessarily want to throw the baggage and generalize a situation and apply it to everybody on an individual basis, right? All police are bad, yeah, all police are liars. Yeah, that's not a correct way to do things. That's why for a long time I've been saying, you know, there are a lot of good officers that keep the system running. The problem is, even with the murder rate going down, messaging like this, and part of it is not because this officer, this senior officer, I have any sort of issues with regards to his prior messaging or what have you. It's with regards to the fact that the situation has persisted and pervaded through our society for so long with regards to how we perceive the TTPS, policing, leadership, not just police leadership, but leadership on a whole. And more and more, just, well, they said a thing. Do we believe the thing? No, because we've grown accustomed, we've been trained. Like Pavlov's dog, don't always believe the thing. At the end of the day, the minister is right. The public does have to help because you do not have police eyeballs over every inch of the country to monitor everything. And even if you had cameras, here's the trick. Even if you had cameras covering every square inch of the country, somebody still has to watch all the footage to analyze the footage, right? Now, you could always wait for a crime and go back and check footage to see, but it's not as easy as TV would make it out to be overall. You can use AI tools to help analyze things like analyzing footage and other forms of intelligence that would have taken a large amount of human effort to sift through. The problem with that is sometimes the AI can get it wrong. America's military used AI tools to identify targets and ended up bombing something that at one point might have been a military target, but recently, or at the time, was a school. So you need the public, because the public means more humans, more human eyeballs and human brains are being applied to analyzing the situation. But if the public doesn't trust you, why? If the police are not necessarily showing that they are willing, able, and are actually cleaning up the service and the various police institutions from corrupt cops, which the public fears would be the source of any retaliation, that is to say, informing the people who would actually conduct the violence, if the public perceives the police as being part of the criminality, why are they going to cooperate? I mean, I don't know how else to say it, except to say at some point now, as much as I said that the police officers themselves need to be more proactive with defending themselves and displaying some sort of urgency with regards to trying to find solutions to these problems. The public needs to demand more, because if the public doesn't demand more, the politicians will say it's fine. Do we really need body cameras? A few people in the press and a few NGOs and a few analysts and stakeholders and newspaper columnists they'll kick up a fuss, but the public don't care. Let's just shoot the bad guys and go home. Public is not going to care. Why bother? And we get what we pay for. Let's take a break, and when we come back, I'll continue the conversations and we'll open the phone line. Stay tuned.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan, and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 68-61662 and start building your future.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond
want
to me. Respond to me. How you would respond to me?
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
Back on talking about WSND to Content Capital, we will open up the phone lines. You could call in and obviously, although I do suspect a lot of the topics of conversation coming out of the weekend, we got the calls yesterday. I get it. There's this whole thing with regards to the Auditor General's report. The thing is, this is just one of those topics that is quite complex. And what has been revealed with regards to that $500 million loan, I have so much questions over it. Part of it is what was the point of the scheme? What were they trying to accomplish? Now, $500 million US is a lot. We've seen the government take out loans of this size, well, bigger loans, to be honest, to deal with the debt from the national budget. Why was it done this way, right? Including the Office of the President and the Port of Spain Waterfront Development Limited. There's a lot that I don't know, and I'll admit that I don't know, that I haven't seen yet. I haven't read enough on it yet to figure it all out. Now, maybe San Fernando's on the line. I don't know if he has an opinion on this. We'll take the call. Caller, good morning. You're on the air. Caller, good morning.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning, morning.
3 quick points. Firstly, the situation with the PNM Tobago Council.
Yeah.
In my opinion, yet again, I think they gone back behind the 8 ball and another bad decision with electing Miss Kojo Lewis. This is another one in a series of blunders as far as I'm concerned. The first one was when they had Mr. Ansel Dennis act as a caretaker for Stacey Davidson Celestine, when they should have appointed Mr. Dennis and made him the leader. We see how that turned out. The second one was when Kelvin Morris was the only PNM Tobago Council member in the THA. And I think after about a year, and he seemed to have had a grasp for the position.
Mm-hmm.
They kept on Mr. Dennis as the leader, which in my opinion again was an incorrect decision. They should have had a special general council meeting, make Mr. Dennis resign and put Kelvin Morris. Ms. Kojo comes now with her baggage, even though the people they elected her in Tobago, the Tobago Council. I think that's another wrong move. I think Mr. Morris should have been looked at as the future. Even though Ms. Kojo went up alone, she doesn't have a slate, and she said what she said about so people is Kelvin people and Kelvin people is so people. I think as far as the leadership goes, I think that's a wrong decision on the part of the voters.
Okay.
That being said, let me go quickly to the air bridge. I think that issue with having that Kamaraj talk about and trying to say that we could have 2 subsidized flights during peak periods, that is rubbish. It is time that the fare is increased, and as I said before, and you know I said this, Sean, $1,000 to go to Tobago, or around $1,000 around to go to Tobago will not be a problem. The next closest island is 3,000 plus, which is Greendot, to go to from Trinidad. The people will adjust. If the THA wants, the THA can subsidize the Tobagonians coming to Trinidad and going back. They have enough money in the budget to do that. And let's move on with this issue. I totally agree with what you said with respect to moving the domestic terminal into the international terminal, apart from wanting to give the passengers exercise, some cardio. That I can't see any other good reason for moving it. Can't see any other good reason. And lastly, Sean, this issue with what you talked about just now there with the police service wanting assistance from the public. I hear the media ambassadors saying it. I hear, I look at some of the programs. I hear the appeal always on a program by ASP Arun. But it is time they go broad-based in terms of these advertisements that they have on the television, that they constantly tell the public this, It comes like a convenience store when you go in the gas station and you pull up the convenience store in your face. Oh shucks, I forget to buy bread. I want to get something inside it. put it in the public's face. Keep it all the time. Eventually, that's how you get the message out. Not by a media ambassador coming once a week on a program and that kind of thing. Put it in the public face constantly. So you have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. I think I'll start with the last point first. I don't know to what extent, because at times we've run stuff for the police and I don't think it was paid. But you know, media houses can give some amount of airtime for the interests of the public good, right? But depending on how much frequency you want, it is going to cost. And we are living in a time period where, among other fiscal decisions, the government has reduced advertisement spending or spending into media houses for government communications. And while I'm not too sure exactly how far the Prime Minister's decision will affect the police directly, that is to say, she's dictating what their budget for, you know, TV time and radio time and social media advertising is, at the end of the day, they've had budgetary constraints since Guy Griffith's time. We know this. And that's one of the reasons why the body cameras stripping is probably, right? And seemingly there's no willingness to put more resources into the police with regards to that. I have more to say about the air bridge because I do believe that there's a lot more room for a lot more of a nuanced discussion. I will agree though, the proposal probably is one of the clumsier ways to do it and probably not the best way to do it, but there is a lot more room to make things more variable. I'll get into that, what I mean, to differ to where your points were. But we have a Rima on the line first. So Rima, good morning, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning, Sean.
Morning, morning.
No, this election was a surprise. I get shocked when I heard about the election. Now, changing the little goalposts are other ways. I have some friends, right? On behalf of them, I'm calling to make a point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they have been working with a company for the past over 12 years and more, right? And they entitled, you know, they're going to retire just now. No, they're reaching the age for retirement just now, right? Since they have been working, they haven't got a pay slip because the company never paid them, never gave them a pay slip, which means the company wasn't paying the NIS contribution for them, right? In a situation like that, what could happen? Imagine this, you entitled with a contribution, even if you're not getting your monthly thing, right? You could get a little something else, but nothing, not even a pay slip. They wasn't paying the contribution to NIS for them. So which means when they retire now, they just sit home without nothing. So I'm calling on behalf of these people. Well, my advice to them, I told them they have to get a lawyer and sit down with the lawyer and let out their point to them. But they don't have no money and lawyer takes money for that.
Yeah.
What in a situation like that? Could you, well, right now they're frustrated. Could you add a little voice on that? They are listening. And we are listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm not too sure if the NGOs like Is There Not a Cause has facilities for this. I do know they help people get jobs. I don't know if to what extent they are prepared or they have the facilities to help people with those kinds of problems, right? And that's just one NGO. So one of the things we probably do need is maybe like a NGO network so that people could be best informed what's available. Past that, in theory, one of the basic solutions would be things like your MP or your whatever local government representation that you have that could potentially, their office could help sort things out because of the fact that you're dealing with NIS, right? So one is going to NIS to inquire yourself. One is getting your elected representative at whatever level to help you if more help is needed, right? And I don't mean under the table help. I mean legitimate, just helping to sort things out. Ultimately, it comes down to this, and maybe they could pool a little bit of money, all of them, to just sit down with a lawyer once, just have one meeting to get the basics down. But it all is predicated on what did they know? Did they know? Did the employer tell them what they were doing? Or did the employer kind of do this behind their backs and they never knew? If they never knew, they probably have a much better case to take legal action if they have an avenue to do so. If they knew, the legality of that notwithstanding, it does make it a little bit more complicated, because then you have a situation where, you know, they could have dealt with it themselves earlier. And that's where it kind of gets a little bit complex, because the law, especially civil law, is not necessarily a static thing, right? It will kind of move with the circumstances and try to get a reasonable outcome. So as much as this whole situation is questionable, it kind of depends on what did they know beforehand, right? And if it comes out that they knew this from the very beginning, they will have some level of responsibility to play, and I don't know how that will play out, to be honest. So if sourcing legal aid is an issue, there might be an NGO available. I am not versed on the NGOs. But maybe going to one NGO might then make any request. If they don't have the facility, they might be able to point in the right direction of who might. And if there's nobody doing this work, unfortunately, this might be just another area where there's a hole in the system and we need someone to help plug this hole. And the hole is only going to get bigger as there are going to be more issues with NIS moving forward. There will be. Case closed. Especially, it's compounded by the issues intrinsic to NIS and the economic issues that will lead employers to do things like this. Let me just leave it there. We have a caller on the line. Caller, good morning.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Sean, I think Mr. Kama Maharaj, you know, I heard you describe his actions as clumsy. I'm not sure whether that's what I heard.
This is the air bridge?
But I think it's a step in the right direction. You need to start that conversation, because when you look at the people who traverse Tobago on a regular basis, I mean, it's more for leisure. People go, they spend holiday, and I don't feel I should be subsidizing somebody who's going to Tobago for holiday. I don't feel that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you would have raised the taxes on alcohol and tobacco, just gambling, justifiably so, because those are leisure items, I am thinking that people wanting to go to Tobago, even come to Trinidad for leisure, they have to pay the price. They have to pay the price. I would consider having registered business people, entrepreneurs, you know, given some sort of consideration for a deduction in the rate or subsidy on the rate. But I think it should be placed on the open market, and if you need to go to Tobago, you simply pay for it. Because we jump aboard and pay to go to Miami, Grenada, Barbados, Antigua, Barbuda, and do not complain. So if we have to go to Tobago and have fun for Easter, pay the price, because you're going to have fun. And I cannot and should not be subsidizing when you're going to have fun. Of course, $1,000 might be a little steep. I think they can probably start somewhere around 600 or 700 and tweak it until we reach the realistic figure. You don't hit them the whole shaft at one time. You try to play with it, see how, measure it, see the benefits, do cost-benefit analysis, and see where we are with respect to that.
Mm-hmm.
With respect to crime and criminality, I heard you mention about 3 people being killed in Valencia, and the police commissioner or the person in charge making a definitive statement. And, you know, yes, and I support them making definitive statement rather than coming out and leaving things out in the open for public speculation. That is where we end up in confusion. Because they have the intelligence that we don't have. So I will not question that. I would have seen where Dr. Munihal would have won a lawsuit against, well, he defended himself against Imali Elias and company NHS. And it's amazing that, I'm not hearing anything about when they would have visited the 11 cases of the OPR, they were flouted. Those are the kind of information we need to have on the television to inform and educate people rather than the bacchanalia. Have a nice day, my friend.
Thank you, caller. You're right. The problem is not the senior officer making a statement. The problem is the environment, where I think members of the public, they're kind of wary about these statements. And a lot of times, like I said this about a lot of the things that Suzette Martin, part of the executive, DCP Martin, has said recently. Some of these things, we might not want to hear it because it seems so, well, of course they're going to say this. But these are they do have to say it. There are certain things that you just kind of have to say, right? But the environment of the trust and confidence being so eroded, it kind of leaves us in a place, I think, and I know people who are probably more cynical about this than I am. The emotional response to it is not positive, right? Even if you understand that, they're just doing the job. It's a very weird place to be because the relationship between the police and the public is so significantly broken. We have Shagonas on the line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air. Caller, good morning.
Hello?
Morning.
Yeah.
You're on the air. You're on the air.
Sean.
Yes.
Do you know that under the NIS law, they're supposed to not more than every 3 years, review their projected revenue?
Well,
but that is a requirement under the law.
When you say,
and it's this they have to use to fix, to revise the rates. Therefore, how it is could the NIS boss?
Well, technically, we weren't talking about that, huh?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. What I'm saying is technically the caller didn't ask about NIS busing.
Hello?
You can't hear me, caller? Yes,
hello?
You can hear me now?
Yeah, now I hear you.
Yes, sorry. Technically, the caller before wasn't necessarily calling about
No, I'm not
NIS.
talking about the caller.
Okay.
No. You all mentioned it.
I did mention it, yes. I did bring that up very indirectly, yes.
Right. And all I am saying, I cannot understand how the NIS could go bankrupt. If every, not more than 3 years, they're supposed to review the revenue sources and fix, to revise the rates.
Mm-hmm.
You have any idea how that could happen?
Well, there's I guess you could say 3. I have 3 ideas. I'm not saying these are right. One, of course, is, mismanagement.
Well, you know that. We
right?
know that
One, of course. What, of course,
but
is...
What is the mismanagement of it?
Well, you see, I don't want to say. It's been a while. I don't want to say. Because there's also the fact that inflation happens. So when you're managing these kind of funds, if you mismanage it...
That review will take into account inflation.
Caller, the thing is, what is observed around the world is because the demographics of when these sorts of schemes were started compared to the national demographics, the population demographics of the current year, that alone causes a situation where it's not quite the same as what it was.
No, the review will take that into account. I could tell you
so then the mismanagement part of it could be...
No, mismanagement is correct, but that is a conclusion. What I want to know, what exactly they did that you call it mismanagement.
I think one of your complaints is the fact that they not just didn't reevaluate, but maybe they kept the requirement too low.
Let me tell you the reason why.
Tell me.
This happened way back when Manning was
Manning,
there.
yes.
When the the people was doing that. He tell them he want a minimum
or
of
the payments. Yes, sorry.
Right? Now at that time, the maximum IRS was $700 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so ridiculous because there is no provision in the law for that. That everybody had to get the minimum. And still there wasn't cover any money. He didn't learn the lesson. And a couple of years after, he went and told them, you wipe review again. But this time he want a minimum of $2,000. And of course make it worse. The IMF or one of them warned them that no, what you're doing there, you're going to use people's contribution to pay out benefits, which should be being invested. And then he lost the next election. And the new prime minister went and do the same thing and said she wants a minimum of a higher figure. And that is what busted. I think I told you that.
Yes, you did. I just, to be honest, I got it mixed up, so I went in the wrong direction.
Okay, well, we'll check it out and see if I am true.
I don't doubt you. I mean, at the end of the day...
I guess you doubt me. I want you all inform the public. I want the public to know.
Fair enough, caller.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many ways that those kinds of institutions could go wrong. And it's already an uphill battle because what the professor is speaking to, basically the politician said, we want more benefits and arguably too much benefit. And the problem is, this is the catch-22 for the politicians now. Now our economy and our population is kind of set up for these things to exist. So to pull back on it or to take it away abruptly will have negative consequences. But the flip side is you're stuck between a rock and a hard place because it was potentially, identifiably unsustainable from the beginning. And it's only worse now because we've seen pension schemes basically over time have certain challenges. Maybe moving forward from this point, it won't get significantly worse depending on how demographics, aging populations, medical science shapes out. But it could lead to pushing retirement ages further and further back, not just this time, but in the future, depending. But we've maybe accelerated the problem. I still have to get to the air bridge on the Tobago election, but we have more on the line. Caller, good morning, you're on the air.
Good morning. To share my thoughts on a situation that I feel everybody already know about, right? The opposition leader will be speaking about a situation with Senator Janelle Bates, right? I'm saying that that there should be some sort of leniency. She already was removed from the two committees. Even when Ford James, the political analyst, he said that there should be some form of leniency. I believe that Mrs. Baines, Janelle, has a contribution to make in terms of national development in the Senate. And I think that good sense should prevail. We have to be mindful that we don't want to have deficits in young people entering politics. And this can be considered as a learning curve for everybody to look at and so forth, and shrinking systems that still need to be built out and so on, right? So my contribution is to Ms. Janelle Baines, that there is sunshine on a cloudy day, and he considered as a woman of promise, and he's still our girl. And thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. I'll say this. She has not given me any information as to that situation, right? I guess it won't be appropriate to do so. I could speculate that there's probably a lot that she can't tell me, right? I can't speculate more than that because then, ironically, if I'm right, and if it's incendiary, there will then be counter speculation that she did tell me and she could get in trouble for that when she actually didn't tell me anything. I'll say this. One, I haven't seen anything to make me believe that she intentionally did anything wrong or did anything that was significantly dealing to do with corruption, right? Or at least had bad intentions along those lines. Now, it might be procedurally bad. It might be one of those things, because I always say it, the perception of, right? To what extent should she have known better? I can't say because the specifics of the situation, I don't know if this is common practice. Maybe it was. right? I don't know what was asked of her. I don't know what is the full context of the advice given, because we only know that she was involved, but we don't know the full extent that she was involved. So there's a lot of reasons why I'm trying to not speak about it. Also, in part, I could try and defend her on my platform, but given the fact that she is someone that's been on the show, that I still, you know, all things being equal, would like to have on the show, because I appreciate the individual, her intelligence, her capacity to analyze things, to speak her perspective and all of that. I agree with the caller. All of those reasons are why I think, yes, I hope to see people like her in politics, because we need more young people willing to step forward, right? Responsibly minded, capable people. Yes, I understand the situation might bring that statement, responsibly minded, to question. I get that, but I'm still throwing it out there. Because she was one of the people that brought it to the attention to talking point that young people were not engaged in issues. Young professionals didn't even follow national issues or want to follow politics and be involved in politics. And she herself was alarmed at that revelation, because the implication was a lot of our most educated individuals who are accomplished, who, as the professor would say, based on how our government was initially set up, it was set up for people who had a certain degree of accomplishment in society. This wasn't a job unto itself. This was after you're successful, now you come and serve. And we've kind of changed politics, but I don't know if we've changed it enough to rebalance it around the current dynamic properly. Not having young professionals willing to, at the very least, follow the news and be informed on the issues, so that when it's time to vote, they have what you would think educated people would also be well-informed people, but not necessarily. So yes, and this is the first potential offense, quote unquote. I hope it doesn't literally cause her career any irreparable harm, because we have seen parliamentarians do much worse. Let's be real. We have seen much worse with little consequence, right? And as the caller pointed out, Winford James, I believe, is more looking at her more experienced colleague than her with regards to having to face further consequences for what has happened, right? So this is just one of those things where I could also speculate that the politics in the situation is not, it could be party politics, could be, you know, parliamentarian back and forth. Like there's so much I don't know, which is why it's best that I don't speak about it in part. And there's a lot that I do not speak about, believe it or not, when it comes to politicians, because there are times when you don't want to get someone in trouble indirectly. Because I know at least in one case where one politician got in trouble because he made his peers look bad. Not because he said anything bad about them, but because he was just trying too hard. And I'll leave that there. So it very much is a thing where I have at times had to play a kind of a waiting game with regards to people, because I don't know if they were in the doghouse just for being on my show, just for having a higher profile in the media in general, just for being someone that showed some capacity to put a proper logical sequence of critical thinking together and present that in a way that most people can understand. And given the fact that a lot of their peers are so incapable, they didn't like the fact that someone was looking more capable than them, outshining them, and it caused those individuals who I respect to be treated the way how they were treated. I don't know if that's entirely true. It is what it is. I'm not going to name names. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. Right, we're more or less out of time, so I'll try and wrap it up. First of all, with regards to the Tobago situation, I don't know if it would be better for them to try to figure out a way to keep Kelvin Morris. I believe that's why the last thing the caller said, it was a mistake of the voters. That's what matters. Unfortunately, the voters voted. I don't think, nor do I want to speculate that there was any funny business with regards to the election, because that is the temptation, because we've seen situations like that before. Ironically, Tracy Davidson Celestine, as far as I'm aware, would not have been Dr. Heath Rowley's first choice. But that was the direction the winds were blowing. And they did not try to force it. And I don't know if maybe that situation is what tempted him or informed him with regards to the Stuart Young succession plan. But at the end of the day, the people spoke. They selected Shamfa Kujo-Lewis. I wish her all the best. I like the first step that she took. Doesn't mean that she's guaranteed to stick to the right path. And of course, there's many good steps that you could take. It's not that there's only one right path, right? But I hope that we see a more mature politician out of her, and she, alongside Mr. Morris and others, could rebuild the Tobago Council so at the very least there's a proper opposition in Tobago. At the very least. Because, as I say before, if you want what's best for the country, it can't be my party succeeds and their party breaks up. Because that is asking for trouble in the long run, as I mentioned before. Now, with regards to the Tobago airbridge situation, we'll wrap up here quick. The solution is clumsy, of just having 2 unsubsidized flights. But you're correct, it is a starting point. Now, I'll say this. The problem is Tobago's tourism industry, domestic tourism industry, was predicated on a ticket price that is subsidized. It's balanced around the whole industry, the economics of it, of certain price points. Tickets, ferry, hotel rooms, it's all low. It's all low. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's too low. Maybe it's too low and we've taken it for granted because Tobago hotels are cheaper than Trinidad hotels in a lot of instances, right? Will the industry survive moving forward if it causes prices to go upwards when we've already done so much to establish it as, and I don't agree with it, but so much effort has been done indirectly to establish it as a budget destination. And that has not been completely a positive situation because we've kind of treated it like a cheap destination. So the level of planning and the professionalism has been lacking. Tobago as a tourism destination seems a lot more disjointed, seems a lot more lackadaisical, and so on and so on. And at times, in a lot of ways, a lot more unprofessional. And then part of the symptoms of that is what we saw at Pigeon Point however many weeks ago. So maybe pushing the price point up a bit, pushing the price scale of the product up a bit might be for the best because we're trying to do this domestic tourism thing maybe too cheaply and it's not sustainable. And I understand some people would say, but hey, people can't afford this and people can't afford that. That's cool, but if it's actually economically not sustainable, it really doesn't matter what is the limits that people could afford because too many businesses are making too much losses or not making enough revenue for it to be a viable economic contributor to society, right? Because you do want to see growth. So there's a balancing act. But I say all that to say, increasing the prices of the plane tickets suddenly, removing the subsidy, that can't be on the table, as Trinity, I believe, said, or one of the callers said, right? But I do think there's a lot more room to vary the situation. Apologies. And in doing so, I don't know if you need to remove the subsidy from Tobago flights because those flights are potentially undersubscribed anyway. So removing the subsidy there might not actually cause you to make more money or reduce the losses. Keeping the subsidy there might be to its benefit. And depending if someone actually did the math, it might be best to drop the prices on the leg that is against the demand. Right? So now, the actual nitty-gritties, somebody probably needs to calculate it. Let me not speculate about that. But I'm just saying, there are certain areas where you can keep the subsidies and certain areas where you could take it off. I don't know if it's right to say Tobagonians go to Trinidad for vacation. But we know that a lot of Trinidadians at certain time periods go to Tobago for vacation. And yes, if you want to kind of gradually move the price point up, but of course that comes to the caveat that if it kills demand, it's a moot point anyway. So it's a complex situation, but leaving it at $400 is probably the wrong decision. So with that said, thanks to the callers. Apologies to the commenter. We'll hopefully answer your questions. I believe the HTC thing might be tied to that, but we'll get to that hopefully tomorrow, or at least start the conversation tomorrow. So until then, stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Have a good day. Don't forget, it's nice to be nice. We'll see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN